Anna Schuleit was born in Germany from a German mother and a Swiss father. She received her BFA from the Rhode Island School of Design in 1998 and an MA in Creative Writing and Book Arts from Dartmouth College in 2005. 1 year later, she was named a MacArthur Fellow, one of the youngest recipients of the $500,000 prize for work that has, and I quote, conceptual clarity, compassion, and beauty. She focuses on turning unexpected places, from hospitals to small islands, into oversized canvases for her work. While constructing Habeas Corpus, she wired an abandoned mental hospital to play the music of Bach and asked former patients to tell their stories. When asked why her interest in mental illness, Anna said, "The degree of civilization of a nation can be measured by the way it treats its weakest citizens." Recent projects include a new site-specific work at UMass Amherst involving a face, a pond, and wild ducks, and an upcoming set design for Ivy Baldwin Dance Company in New York. In addition to her site-specific work, Anna exhibits drawings and paintings both here and abroad. Someone asked Anna how an idea for a project presents itself and how she finds the one idea and how it is brought to fruition. She replied, "By running imaginary tests, canceling out yesterday's colors, engaging in doubts as if they were your primary reason for being here, taking two steps of wavering courage forward and 3 of certain doubt back. Somewhere in between, the piece begins to take shape." Please join me in welcoming Anna Schuleit.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for that very kind introduction. A special greeting to my students today who I had such pleasure meeting. Thank you guys for sharing your work with me. It means so much to me to see what you're doing. I recently had a conversation with a conceptual artist, Annette Lemieux, who some of you might know, and she said, public art. The public doesn't need public art. What the public needs is a vacation. And it made me think. It made me think about what that means. What is a vacation? A vacation is an altered state, something that transports us. Can the field of public art do that, I wonder? Can it still provide us with such an altered state? So I'm bringing you my process. I want to share with you how I went from A to B to A, and share with you why, trained as a painter with a heart for painting, I ended up doing something that wasn't painting at first. I was interested in psychiatric institutions when I was at RISD as an undergrad. For years and years, I would try to go and see and look what they were like and try to paint them. But I realized that the painting was a reduction of the image I was interested in. I was really interested in these buildings. And so what I started doing was I started taking these walks, and I recorded my walks in diagrams, diagrams of remembered motion throughout the buildings and around the grounds. And I realized that the work I was doing was not that of a painter, but really of an archaeologist, trying to look for connections, trying to read into what I was finding. And when I finally had the permissions, that I'm going to talk about that tomorrow, permissions to go inside, I found this, which is an amazing world, almost underwater, of crumbling decay and beauty. So once I was inside, I realized combining my walks with what was there, really just what was there, would lead me to collect the paint. So it was my first conceptual piece, and my professors at RISD were very pleased because it wasn't the time for figurative painting then. So they encouraged me to do more, and I presented them like this. So the walk goes from left to right. This is one walk through a building. Each of the squares is one of the patient's cells, and each of the long rectangles is a lobby or lounge that's large. But I was looking for the faces. I was really trying to see who these people were who were in these institutions, and none of the work that I did was really yielding any results. I couldn't find the faces of those who had been there, especially the patients. The one before the slide showed the superintendents all lined up in suits, and then sometimes every now and then in archives I would find an image that showed the employees. So here are the employees. What I'm really interested in this picture is up top left, you see a person behind the window. So those are the people I was looking for and couldn't find, because most of the images that are left from the institutions are these. They show beds, neatly made, crowded, and statistics such as these. This is the barbershop, annual report, 1958, 1959. There were haircuts. If you scroll down, you see 9,908 haircuts, but no faces. And then I would go inside and document hospital after hospital and find sometimes something like this. This is a mural in Dixmont State Hospital, which has since been torn down, showing faces painted on the wall. And I later, by sheer coincidence, found the person who had painted this 40 years ago. And I interviewed her. And I said, "Who are the faces?" And she said, "Oh, they're the staff." I said, "Yes." So they painted oversized figures of the staff in the hallway for patients, because there wasn't enough staff there already. If you really look, and if you spend much time in the archives, you can sometimes find patients in very rare photographs, such as these. There's a reason why these are not easy to find, because they were gruesome. They're very sad, they're very neglected. Most of the decades of psychiatry in this country were full of abuse, or at least neglect. And then I would get calls from people who said, "Would you like to document the closing of Medfield State Hospital?" And I had the fortune to work with somebody who was taking the inventory of Medfield State Hospital outside of Boston and sizing it down to give off the valuable items to other state agencies and trash the best. And so he was dividing all the items like Noah's Ark into small fans, medium-sized fans, big fans. And these are the buildings. Usually just before being torn down, which is what happens mostly due to their sheer size, these buildings are completely neglected, water damaged, falling apart, and bereft of all their valuables. Everything gets taken out, the copper, the woodwork, all the ironwork. This is an institution outside of Pittsburgh, founded by an amazing woman in the 19th century, Dorothea Dix, who picked this hilltop for its exquisite beauty facing west. And this is the state I found the hospital in after it had been closed down, fallen apart, burned multiple times, and was just about to be flattened for a Walmart supercenter. It's also listed on the Register of Historic Places. And I climbed all the way into the attic, and this is the kind of photograph I don't show my mom, but I love showing you because all the timbers below my feet were charred and ready to break, but it was so special to be up there. These are more photographs from the old days, just before it became really overcrowded and neglected, looking like this as people moved out. So what is it that's moving here, if anything? The happiest home, when it is abandoned and begins to decay with the seasons, will look dreary to a passing visitor. Psychiatric architecture, when it decays, is ever more dreary looking, since it was never happy to begin with. Its decay is a doubling of misfortunes. So I graduated from RISD, and I had no idea what to do, except I had this one dream to turn this entire architecture into a sound body. after taking all my walks around Northampton State Hospital, which was a 2.5-hour drive from Providence, I realized that the only way to deal with this artistically for me would be to work on a one-to-one scale with the building, not to reduce it into an image, but to use it at its own scale. The building measures 414,000 square feet, 414,000 square feet of connected space. And I had the idea to turn it into a sound body. So just like a violin or a guitar has a void that makes it sound, I wanted to turn the voids of this building, the halls and cells and kitchens and lounges and lobbies and seclusion cells, into a sound body. So they're the main hallways, and then there are single rooms to either side. This was called the bullpen because the walls were 3 feet thick, and it was for people who were severely disturbed and often kept there for their entire lives. I had a team of 80 people that helped me do this, and I'm not going to say now how, but it took 4 years to do. The idea was to turn it into a sound body and have it sound only once for 28 minutes. So those 28 minutes took 4 years to do. We installed the speakers inside the hospital the way you install light when you try to make it bounce through a building. We never sent out the sound directly out of the windows, but we made it bounce off a wall and then out the window so that the music would take on the color of the architecture. This was the power cable, of which I had 7,000 feet. And you can't rent this because you have to chop it up to make it fit the various turns you take. So you have to buy it, and I still own a piece now, a spool. It was like lifting an anchor inside this building. In order to move the power cable through the building, we all had to pull at the same time because otherwise it wouldn't have gone around the corners. From the beginning, it was clear that really the story to be told here is not one that I'm telling, but that is one that belongs to the patients. So for a year, I was teaching a class at Smith College, a seminar about the history of the hospital. All of the students became my volunteers, but with that class, we decided to expand our events from the 28 minutes to an event that was going to include the patients. This is Sage Hall at Smith College, and these are the patients telling their own stories, which they hadn't ever been invited to do. So they were telling their stories at Smith, and then the idea was that we walk from Smith College with whoever was attending. It was a free and open event, up to the hilltop. And the music that was a double. The music would turn on at a volume that was 45,000 watts, which is the strength of a small radio station. And then it was going to sing for 28 minutes and then be over. And all my friends who were close to me at that time were worried that no one might show up except for my closest friends. But people ambled up the hill all together from the symposium at Smith College to the hilltop, and they were not just hundreds, they were thousands of people. Many of which came because they had no idea how bad this was going to be, and the press had talked about it extensively. They had said, "Let's see how she fails," and had published all these articles about my strange endeavor. But the local radio station, a rock station, which is very popular in Northampton, had a guy moderator who picked this up as his pet project for the week, and he would run jingles of Johann Sebastian Bach, which was the music I picked, for 5 seconds, and then he would say, "And on Saturday, Anna Schuleit is blah, blah, blah." So people came, which was one of the biggest shocks of my life. And it was scheduled for 12:05 p.m., And this is one of the shots that shows someone having the experience of hearing this building. The building was sounding out of all directions. There were 4 paved courtyards that were resounding with the audio. And this is one of the former patients who became a friend, who posed for this picture, although I have to say he doesn't have to pose because this is how he is. And he became our prophet, so to say. He lifted it. People thought I had hired him, but I had never met him before. After this project was over, I became a visiting artist at Westboro State Hospital. Our therapist called me and said, "Would you like to work with an institution that is not closed but still operating?" And I was very happy to go. I didn't know what it meant. She said, "There's no pay and there's no salary and you're not officially employed. Basically, the position doesn't exist, except that I really want you here." And we became friends, and I was very lucky to spend 3 years from 2001 to 2004 as their visiting artist or resident artist. And while I was there, I was able to see the world of institutions from the inside. I had no keys, so the patients thought I was more like them than the staff. These are pictures I took when I had more official access to the buildings. I would wait until someone gave me the permission, try to get their trust and allow me inside these buildings before they were closed down. This is a slide from an institution that was for chronic, violent men who didn't have anything. I interviewed a nurse who worked there for 30 years, and she said they didn't have clothes, and they didn't have forks and knives. They just couldn't be trusted. They walked around naked all day, and they weren't sanitary, but they were able to etch this into the marble with their fingernails. Newer buildings reveal moments of use, such as this lock, where the keys are continuously banging into the wall, making a groove. In 2003, the Massachusetts Mental Health Center was closing, which is across Brigham and Women's Hospital on Fenwood Road. Very eminent institution, not like a backward institution like Northampton State Hospital, but a research institution with many good things going on. It looked like this, very different, not dilapidated. It was filled with people, and the building was closing. And I got a phone call, and someone said to me, "Can you do the music again?" And I said, "No." That was site-specific, and he said, "Site what?" And I said, "Never mind." It doesn't matter. I said, "I'll come for a visit. I'd like to see this building." And I went to see this building, and as you can tell from this plan, compared to the earlier one that I showed you, this is a very contained, human-scale building that had gardens on the inside. Patient's garden on the left for men and on the right for women, which for many years had fallen into overgrowth. And so the gardens were incredibly lush and filled with ivy. Everyone who had a window of the staff, everyone who had a staff window facing the courtyards had green windows because the ivy covered their windows so much. So I got the idea, the beginning of an idea for this, by looking around. For the first time, I found images that aren't easily found in state archives. These were archives that were very well kept because it was part Harvard, part Department of Mental Health of Massachusetts, and they kept meticulous care of their pictures over the years, including these very rare images from the 40s. And I began to see people who weren't completely neglected, but people who were in states of healing and improvement and were given a chance for a better life. So the people who had called me said, "So do you have an idea?" And I said, "I would like a key to every door in the building and a week and an office and somebody who knows all the stories to the institution. And then I'll meet you in that week. Give me a week's time. And I don't know if I'm going to have an idea, but I got the office, I got the key to every door, I got a person who knew many, many stories of the institution, and I had a week, and within one day I had the idea for the next project. But you don't say that because people think it's too easy. So I waited the entire week and ran tests in my head to see if it were something I wanted to do. The idea was based on my time at Westboro State Hospital as a visiting artist. I had noticed that unlike people who have cancer or appendicitis or give birth, people in psychiatry just do not get flowers. And there are many reasons for that, and we can talk about that at some point. There's no real reason, really, except people are afraid to not get the right moment to give that gesture of caring. And so for this project, which was a much different building, I knew I wanted to work with the inside of the building and illuminate these passageways, traffic ways, hallways that people were using every single day by bringing back all the flowers that had never been given to the patients that had been there over 91 years. So I added up the number of patients that had been there for 91 years, times the number of flowers they would have gotten. I came to a minimum of 25,000 flowers. So then the week ended, and I presented this to the committee, which consisted of all men. It was 12 men, very biblical. And they were kind of nervous because they had realized when I took that week to think about it that it probably wasn't going to be a piece of music I was going to play. And they were all stressed because they were moving out of their offices. So I showed them what I show you, which is the plan of the building, some of the images from the past. And I told them the idea to add up all the flowers. And then I said, I'm going to leave the room now, and I let you discuss this amongst yourselves. And when I come back, I either want a yes or a no. The reason for that is we only had 90 days to do this project. A museum commission takes 3 years. A gallery exhibit takes a year. We had 3 months to do this. They had told me this beforehand. So we have no time to waver. If you say yes to me, I'll give you my all, and we go into this, and I'm going to try to pull this off. But I don't want a maybe when I come back. You can call me back in. So I went outside, and I sat on the steps, and I waited for them to call me back inside the room, and it took a while. And then one of the secretaries came out and said, Ms. Schuleit, they're ready for you. And I went back inside, and they all looked kind of tense. And one of the doctors who had been there his whole career and who was heading the Harvard Medical School Department of Psychiatry, Massachusetts Mental Health Center department, he said, Anna, so I have been here all my life, and he started choking up. And he said, I really want to do this, and if I have to give you my own savings to do this. And the other men looked at him and said, Jim, because when I was gone, he hadn't said all this. He only started saying this when I came back in the room, which was really special. I realized he was really believing in this project. So I wanted to beat 25,000, which was my artificial random number. It was an absurd number. And I didn't want to use cut flowers because cut flowers wilt within 3 days, 5 days, maybe a week. And I didn't want this to go to waste, so I ordered potted flowers, but it was November. Little side note, I always wanted to work with 18-wheelers, so that in the far back is my first 18-wheeler for a project. It came from Canada and had 15,000 tulips on it, which just made me so happy. While I ordered these flowers, which were all timed to bloom at the same time, coming from 20 different growers all across the United States, while I bought them, which was on the telephone, I had to look them up in a book because I didn't know much about flowers. I just wanted the colors. I knew I wanted red, green, I wanted yellow and blue and purple and white, but I knew tulips, but I didn't know all the rest. And I knew that for the basement, flowers were not fitting because in the basement, patients had never had their rooms. There were always labs there. So we decided to do the entire basement, which was 6,000 square feet, in live grass. Again, we had a forum for the patients to tell their stories on the front steps. And this is what it looked like. So now you might wonder, how did you move through this building and see all this? It was 4 floors, and I left enough floors open without flowers that you could move through the entire building and see it, but not walk all the floors. You could see them from both sides. And when you placed them, they came from the trucks, not watered. They were dry, because the growers send them to you so that when you receive the flowers, you immediately have to water them. Because if they water the plants before they go in the trucks are twice as heavy. So then they can't put as many flowers on the trucks. So we had to water them immediately as we got them. So on one day, we got 20,000 flowers. On the next day, we got 8,000 flowers. And we made it to 28,000. My plant broker, which was the man who helped me buy all the flowers and get the best price and a commission, he said to me, "Anna, there's someone who is selling amaryllis real cheap. You want them?" And I said, "What color?" And he said, "Red." And I said, "Yes." But I didn't know what amaryllis were. And it turned out we only had 150, which was nothing. For any of the hallways you just saw, we needed 1,000, 2,000 to make that continuous cover. But for the amaryllis, we only had 150, so as soon as they got off the truck, I hated them. I put them aside, and I didn't know what to do with them, and I thought they were really not fitting the project because they were so, look at me, look at me, look at me. They're very pretty, but I wanted color to flow like liquid, and so they were just not fitting, and I didn't know what to do with them until the night before, 10 p.m., when I realized that the hallway where the superintendent's office was and the directors had one of those fire extinguishers that you can see here. And one of the attempts I made throughout the project was to mirror colors that were already existing in the building with the plants I placed there. Very subtle connections. And I knew that 150 amaryllis were not enough to fill the entire hallway, so I made a line. So this is the only graphic floor where all the rest was wild chaos. The Massachusetts Mental Health Center was the first hospital in the nation to have a child psychiatry research unit, and for me, that hallway was always white tulips. This is the mailroom, and this is one of those proverbial couches of the psychoanalytic tradition. That furniture was all left there when the people who inhabited the building last moved out. And this is a plant that was incredibly ugly. It's called strep throat. That's the waiting room that was until the very end used by the homeless mentally ill of Boston. This is Heather from California that came on a truck for 6 days to be in this project. In order not to dry out completely, it had a wick which transported water from a double bottom pot into the top of the flower, which means it was more expensive. And this is the downstairs basement, which we carpeted wall to wall. The grass, if you ever work with grass, it's a wonderful material. It spreads like sushi. You can cut it, you can mold it, you can go around those pipes. So it was really like a carpet. But it grows and it dries out. So if you were looking for me during those 4 days when the project was open to the public, you found me in the basement watering and raking. I thought that was a really meditative sort of thing after a very stressful 3 months. This hospital was also special in that it had a pool that had mostly been used for staff until the filter broke, and then it was used for furniture storage. So when I saw the pool, I knew it was going to be blue flowers. Blue flowers were really hard to get in November, and I didn't have them until Wednesday. The project opened on Friday. And on Wednesday, I got a call from my plant broker who said, Anna, I found blue flowers in Florida. Want them? They're more expensive. I said, yes. As I'm telling you this, I'm realizing I forgot to tell you that I didn't have a budget that was set. I was simply buying the flowers and hoping that Harvard was going to bail me out. That was very, very different from the first project. The first project ran all on my name. In this project, Bloom, I used the letterhead that was basically out of use because the building was closing. So these blue flowers are purplish blue. They came from Florida on a plane, and they were the last ones we installed. We got 3,000 of them. And they're African violets, which I think are the most beautiful flowers. They're like many of these patients. They're very humble flowers that have beautiful colors. And this is the upstairs shelter, 3rd floor. These are mums. Mums, when you buy them, come in sleeves, plastic sleeves. If you cut the plastic sleeve out of enthusiasm to see it unravel, you will never get it back together. The mum will just go, whew. And then if there's a mum next to it, they will interlock and never let go. So we had the problem of initially having taken all the sleeves off, and then we had to basically tear them apart to move them and place them in position. This is what I wanted from the beginning, was a wildflower field. And these were tulips that were in a sunny location with the chair left as it had been left by the people who had left the building. And they opened and closed with the sun, so they were very much alive, and it smelled amazingly in the building. My promise had been that I'm only spending all these resources to buy so many flowers if I'm going to find a place for them afterwards. So the idea was that people who are still behind bars, who are in psychiatric units across New England, will receive these flowers right after the project ends. So you saw how the 18-wheeler arrived with three floors of tulips. We had a U-Haul that only had 1 floor, so it took us forever to deliver these 28,000 flowers. These are 600 we're delivering to Worcester State Hospital. So 600, that was 1/2 day of a trip. And this is the reaction of the nurse when they received it. I said to her, please make sure, because I can't go inside because it's always off limits, please make sure that not the staff receives these flowers. These are for the patients. This is a partial list of the places that received flowers that were significant amounts. The flowers went to hundreds of people and places, but these are the large ones. For this project, I also had 70 to 80 volunteers, and they disappeared once the flowers were installed, and I was basically left alone delivering the flowers for 4 weeks with just 3 or 4 people who didn't leave my side. That was great. But I got to meet all the people who we delivered the flowers to. And then I said, I'll never do installation art again. Each time it just kills me. And there's no money in it. You can't even pay your own wage. I never put myself in the budget, something I'd like to tell you not to do. When you write a budget for any project, try to put yourself in and give yourself a living wage. But I received a phone call from the ICA in Boston, and they asked me, would you like to do a big public art project on an island? And I said, public art? I just want to paint, really. But they said, no, it's a big island, and it's called, actually, they asked me I could pick it, and I picked this one out of 32. I took the boats around and picked Lovell's Island, which is an old military fort. And I spent 3 summers researching this island's history. On the 2nd summer and the 3rd summer, I stayed in a yurt. So I was the artist in residence on the island. There was no electricity and no running water. You can do that for 5 days and it's fun. If you do it for 2 months, it was a strain, because every drop of water matters. It's like being in the desert, except you're right outside of Boston. This was my studio there, and I kept painting, and I tried to come up with an idea for this project, and I tried to watch people use the island People on islands and beaches behave in a funny way. They're out in the open, but it's also an intimate space because really nobody is ever watching them. So they take walks like this, they shield themselves from the sun, and they stand and look. Especially men, stand and look. Here's another one, stand and look. So I realized, what are they looking at? So they're looking at two things. They're looking at the amazing blue ocean and the amazing blue sky and this one line the two make where they meet. And I realized that's what I would like to work with. I knew, again, this was not a painting project. And I watched the animals use the island in their own ways. And this was the beach, the long beach facing east, and I happened to come from that east. I happened to come from Europe. Where the trees are in the distance is where they had very large guns that they installed in the 1940s, to defend the city of Boston from the Germans. So I thought that would be interesting to work with. Those guns, fortunately, were never used. The project was called Intertidal, an installation for Lovell's Island. The intertidal zone is the junction of the atmosphere, hydrosphere, and lithosphere. It's the only place in the world where the three meet continuously, and there's some evolution theory that we come from that zone. The red on this map shows the locations of the military ruins. And these are some of the current pictures of the old guns and the distant horizon in the back. This was the gun that they had installed, huge gun. It would perk up, shoot, and then disappear so that you couldn't tell where the shooting was coming from. I thought the project would be that all I needed to do was install a device to neutralize these guns. The guns are gone, so the idea is absurd. But I thought, what if I use mirrors in the water to reflect just what's there, to create these very long, narrow paintings opposite from the guns. So now try to imagine what that would be. You are on the beach and you see yourself on the beach. The mirrored scenes will appear like oversized paintings of the landscape. The flatness of the image is crucial. The structure of it shouldn't be seen, just the reflection. So you'd only see the image. Crowds will multiply, stranded lovers will double, bathers will watch themselves bathe. And seagulls will rest along the invisible top edge of the glass, seated in midair, wings folded, seemingly afloat. The idea was that there was a performative aspect to this project, that I was continuously cleaning the mirrors day and night for the duration of the installation. The project was green-lighted and then underfunded and couldn't be built. Unfortunately, we couldn't build it because the intertidal zone happens to be where the most force hits the land, and to build mirrors that are perfectly still required a substructure that basically, even though it was only meant for a summer, was going to be the structure of a permanent dock, which costs millions of dollars. So I gave up public art and installation art. I said, I'm painting now, and moved to New Hampshire and got a studio in this old yarn mill. And since I got to see your spaces today in my guest crits with you, for which I'm so grateful, I'm going to show you a quick overview of my chaos in my space. Every time I come out of these large projects, my friends know this, say, I will never do this again. I just want to paint. These are the paintings I'm working on now. Now, up to this point, I haven't shown a single painting, so it doesn't make much sense. But what I had started with years ago were continuous series of figures. And these were series that were mostly abstract, although body parts were always semi-realistically inserted into this. I kept doing more and more of these because the faster and the more numerous they were, the more spontaneous they were too, and the more I liked them. And I tried to turn these works on paper, of which you see one here, into larger paintings. And today I spoke with several of you about the transition from smaller to large and what you have to do, or what one might do to make that transition. The transition requires that, I think, that you enlarge your tools too, and it took me a while to come to that. What I liked on paper, the marks, the speed of the marks, and the calligraphic quality of these marks, I wanted to have in my paintings. And I realized one of the things about the paintings is that we always fill them into the edge. Why is that? So the paintings I started doing at that time, this was in 2004 or 5, were large. These are still the works on paper, but the paintings I was doing were large paintings that started to be on grounds that were left neutral. These are more figurative studies. So this is one of them. It wasn't a single painting, it was 3. And since then I've been working in 3s, 5s, 7s, 11s. Never even numbers make me more comfortable. And leaving natural linen as my background, the way we leave paper and drawings as the background too. We don't fill in the entire paper, or often don't. Another thing I started doing was that the parts that are recognizable, I tried to keep life-size so that they weren't a reduction from life, but rather a one-to-one scale to the body. So if you see feet, they're actually the size of feet. And then the rest is utterly abstract. Working on the ground as a unchanging background made me think that every mark I put down gets seen and gets recorded, so there's no editing, is only layering. And I try to keep the lightness of drawings without building up too much mass. This is a piece I did last October for a show I had in New York called 2 People Ago. This was the first painting where I had 2 people next to each other in the painting. So now I am so honored to show you this for the first time. I haven't shown this to anyone. This is the work I just completed because someone called me from UMass and said, "Do you want to do a big public art project?" And I said, "Can it be a painting, please?" And they said, "Oh, whatever you want. Just come to UMass and take a look." And so what I found at UMass, which is a huge campus, I think it's like BU, it's 25,000 people, is a center. At the center is the Fine Arts Center, which is beautifully located right next to a pond. And while I was sitting on the bench that I'm taking these 3 pictures from, I saw that the reflection, as you can see on the right, is a mirror image, of course, as we all know, of what's above. So the idea was to use the Fine Arts Center wall and to create on a huge scale a face. Now, none of my paintings for years and years have ever contained a face. I don't know what exactly happened there. It reminded me of a trip I took to Hadrian's Villa outside of Rome. Hadrian's Villa is a ruin, but there are some ditches that are filled with water. And when I was visiting there, there was a huge fish that looked at me from the water. It looked at me, it made eye contact, and then it kind of sunk down and swam off. I think it was a bass or a goldfish from 2,000 years ago. It really was enormous. And I remember that moment of looking at each other, the fish and I, years ago, and I thought I'd like to make that eye contact again. So I proposed this. I proposed to paint an upside-down face on this wall. The face is 45 feet tall and 40 feet wide. And it's on the left, on the diagram, it's right where it says art gallery. And this is the bench I was sitting at when I had the idea on a very bad day. All the water is rippled, you can't see any reflections. And this was the beginning of the project. I had 3 weeks to do this. And I was working on a crane. For the underpainting, I had students who helped me with the white and the black. We got golden, which many of you use if you use acrylic paint, to sponsor the project, which I was so thrilled about. And within very few days of painting, it looked like this. So this is just a painting, which makes me so excited because I love painting. And anyone I met today knows that this is really excitement I share in a time when we use screens and monitors and video projections. But what's so exciting to me about working on just a painting is that painting too can have, I hope, a contemporary edge in that it can be site-specific and can require you as a viewer to seek it out and find it. This is the very top. Here I'm 60 feet up in the air. The building people said, no way, when I proposed the idea. You can paint on a support. And I said, if I paint on a support, then this will resemble advertising more than painting. I would like to be more in the realm of graffiti than advertising. It can't be clean and safe. It has to be a form of trespassing. And so they said, well, can you paint so that it comes off? So the project was commissioned as a 3-month commission. It's supposedly up until November. And I made all these tests in in March, April, and May with different paints and realized that if you apply acrylic paint in a certain thickness, it will adhere to itself more than it will adhere to the ground. So we had to really paste the paint onto the wall, like frosting. While I was painting, the campus was slowly filling up with people. And so one of these boys on the day before had walked by and said, "What is it?" And he yelled up at me in the crane, and I yelled down, "What do you think it is?" And he says, "It's a butterfly." And I said, "No." He said, "It's a cupcake." And I said, "No." And he said, "What is it?" He was really mad at me for not telling him. And I said, "Well, just go across the pond and look at it from that bench." And he said, "What?" And I said, "If you want to know, please do." And he went over, and he was completely excited because he saw it. He was basically the first person. The next day, he brought his cross-country team, and they're all standing there scratching themselves because that day there was no reflection because the water was rippled. I'd never painted on a crane, and you have to learn how to drive it. It's actually a boom lift. It was a lot of fun because it shields you from anyone wanting to stop by and chat. You can just stay up there, and I stayed there for 3 weeks, full days, just morning till night. And the problem was that, of course, while painting it, I couldn't check it. I had my painting, my little one, but I couldn't check how it looked close up because it was all immense and abstract. And then I had to come down, run across the pond, go to the bench and check it, and then run back if I wanted to make a change, which meant I went there 600 times. But within just a few days, when we had done the black and the white, not even any of the colors yet, did we have this face in the water, which was really freaky and eerie, because I actually, when I proposed the idea, had no idea if it was going to work. And the water is never entirely still. So it moves, and hence the face moves as well. So you see my parade car here. This is the blue ticker tape. I used tape to lay out the face, and then to alter it over and over again, because the angle was such that the face on the wall had to be wider than it appeared in the water once you went to that bench. So I did this over and over again, and I changed the tape, went back, checked. And then once I took the tape off, I just filled it all in and made it black and white. And after that came all the color, all the real painting. So that was the day when we opened our really, really expensive paints. I had asked Golden they said, which colors do you want? And I said, cadmium and cobalt. And so they sent us these they actually are the ones that will last the best outdoors. And these are people coming by and saying, what is it? What is it? And 2 boys walked by and they said, well, no. I'll save that for later. But yeah, so it was a lot of guessing. And the name of the project was just a rumor, because really I didn't want this to be about the face's identity. I didn't want this to be about someone who anyone would finally recognize and say, oh, it's Einstein, because people always think it's Einstein when you paint a man with wild hair. And this is in the last phases when there were lots of daubs of red and brown and gray. So I made the chin much redder and browner and more abstract and more loose than the rest of the face, because I didn't want it to be entirely recognizable and whole and complete on the wall. I wanted it to come together in the water. So this is, I think, last week. And these are some close-ups of the paint. It really is a painting. And when I was close to it, I didn't quite know the marks I was making. I was just painting. It was entirely abstract. And I got a really great iPod from someone who said, you want to switch? You can have mine, I can have yours. And that's dangerous, but I got his. And the last day was just crazy because his iPod was so great. And I started painting all these really fast parts of the face. The opening reception was on a Friday, and the crane was supposed to be picked up on a Thursday, and on a Thursday I knew I wasn't done. I hadn't done the blues, and here, you see, this is my favorite shot because it really shows the project with the ducks. The ducks are part of this project because they swim through the face, distorting it, abstracting it, and then bringing it back together. But for some reason here, you can see the cobalt blues that I applied that I never thought were going to travel across the distance. The project is up until November 15th, if you want to see it. And you guys know where to go. Many people on the UMass campus still don't know. I wanted it not to be didactic and tell anyone where to go, so it's a word of mouth sort of thing, and people go, what? And so once I heard a girl walk by who was telling her friends, and this is an upside-down butterfly, and you have to go to the top of the hotel to see it. And I said, what? Where did she get that? This is the work I do every day. I'm now preparing a work for a set design, which is 23 by 10. So it's a painting. These are blind drawings I do every single day, have for the last 10 years. They're my warm-up. We talked today in your studios about some of the warm-up techniques you do to just loosen up and get into the flow of painting. For me, it's line drawing. I draw line from objects in the nude especially. So this is my repertoire. When I go into a large painting, I have hundreds of leaves of body parts to look for and look through and find things that I am building into my painting. So they're all built from actual sources, but then abstracted to the point of almost no recognition. There's something going on with feet and legs in all my work. And the face is really just an anomaly. I'm not continuing to do faces. So this is my studio right now. And I think that's my last slide, so I'm ending right here. And I thank you very much.
What artists you inspired you when you were younger?
Inspired which part?
When you were young.
When I was young?
Yes. And actually, when did you paint your first painting? How old were you?
I was born into a family of artists. My mom is an artist, my dad was a designer. My oldest sister is a collagist, my brother's an architect, and my younger sister is an animator, and my other sister, we're 5, is a mime. So she went to clown school. So my mom, I remember, never ever asked me, she never told me that American thing that you could do anything you ever want. She said, you're going to be an artist. Just pick your discipline. And I hated that. I wanted to become a stewardess. So for my entire early years, I dreamt of joining Lufthansa. But Lufthansa has a height requirement. You have to be 5'9", and I'm 5'11". So I couldn't become a stewardess, and my mom to this day says, oh, thank God. But I was secretly painting, and that's because I was naturally drawn to it, and I painted, I don't know, I never stopped drawing since I was a kid, and then I started painting when I got my first acrylics and oils, which my mom strategically did when I was 11 and 12 and all that. So, but what I remember most about growing up is that my mom has a knack for art books, and they're stacked knee-high in our house. They're always in motion. They're not on shelves. Everywhere you sit, there are stacks of art books. So I was very fortunate to have glimpsed at all the just anything. My mom loved the Russians, and she was a fan of Klee and Chagall, and so am I. Just the greats. And then when I came here and went to RISD, I became much more excited about the New York school, and I still am, of course. De Kooning, I talked to one of you guys today about de Kooning. So that's early, yeah. My mom loved Kandinsky, and of course, secretly I did too, but openly I would say, nah. Beckmann, Max Beckmann, yeah.
I had a question about the figures you're painting about. Is there a connection with the patients from the mental hospital? Or I just didn't understand the transition.
Well, actually, I can't show you the whole development of just the paintings because of time reasons. So there wasn't a transition. I was always painting while I was working on the big projects. But the big projects were what I connected to other people with. And the paintings no one really cared about. So that was my private practice. The figure was always in it, and the figure is to this day just the figure. It's not a meaningful figure. It's usually a nude. I love the nude. They're not patients. I'm not really interested in having sort of meaningful figures with identities that you have to, as a viewer, uncode. So no, they're just the human form.
Anna, could you tell us why you decided to come to the United States to study?
I hinted at it. I think everyone is an artist, and I guess first of all, I'm one of those Europeans who thought that the U.S. is the free world to this day. I think you are, and it's a wonderful country, and I wanted to have my own adventure, and I have the travel bug in me, so I always keep moving. And I left Germany when I was 16 and never went back. So I just found my own space here. That's really the reason.
I was just wondering what the boy said that you said we would get back to later when he saw your painting.
Okay. So there were 2 boys walking by. You guys. 2 boys walking by, and one says, dude, what is that? And the other one says, it's a vagina. And the other one says, it's too intense, I can't take it, and walked off. So, But if painting can do that still, that makes me so happy. If people wonder what it is and don't just blank it out, that makes me happy. Thank you.